Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Ryan Rice. On this episode, I want to go over how to fish a body of water if you have no electronics on your kayak or boat, whatever. So right now it's winter time. There's not much vegetation on the surface. You just have what's growing along the banks here. But still, even all that dead vegetation right along the edge here is going to hold fish. What I would look for though more, see the vegetation right there, how it's kind of grown out and it's sticking out. I would fish on either side of that point and right along the face of that. You know, fish are going to hide back into those little coves. Right back there where there's that little bit of indentation is where I would cast a jig or a Texas rig worm or creature crawl. You know, they're going to be hiding right there. I mean, you can see right here, this might have been a fish or it might have been a turtle. But, you know, I would fish along the edge of the dead vegetation. Anywhere where it's sticking out or anywhere where it offsets back in is where I would throw a lure. Now, you can work the whole bank, but I would definitely pinpoint those certain areas first that catches my eye. You know, anywhere where it sets back in. As we come up here, you can see, same thing. We have a little bit indentation right there. I would cast right into like that pocket, and you got another little bump out there. I'd cast right in front of that, or I'd cast right back where that, you know, where that little recess is right there as well. As you work yourself along here, you can see there's just a little dead patch right here. I would fish that dead patch in between where the other patch is, because, you know, fish right now, since they have nothing to really hold on to, they're going to find anything that they can grab. So I would fish along this isolated patch right here. You have a little bit of a tree branch or a bush branch sticking out here. You know, I would fish right along this, creep up on it and just cast, you know, just plop a jig in there or a Texas rig setup and just get close to all this vegetation, you know, even the Cinco. You know, right now where it's colder, you know, the fish are a little bit lethargic. You want to fish a little slower anyway. Right in front of us, we have it almost like a point. It's a very small point, but you have a point that sticks out and then goes back in. I would fish right here along this point and work, you know, maybe even like an underspin or a spinner bait right in front of this and just swim it right along the edge of this point before it recesses back in, and then work along the bank right here as well, you know, parallel with this bank before it goes back in. And then you can see as we come up here, the patch of dead growth that used to be a lily pads has died off right now. So I'd fish along these pads, and, you know, like I said, you got the pockets over here. I would fish these pockets, and if you can get behind there is a little bit open water behind these pads. If you can get back in there, you know, stand up, cast back in there with a jig, you may get a lone fish that's really far back in there holding tight along that bank. It's hard to fish like offshore when you don't have electronics, really, because you don't, as you see here, there's really nothing sticking up. There's nothing that's isolated that's going to hold that fish. So you got to kind of work the banks for the most part. It's kind of hard, you know, just to go out and because you're just gonna be blind casting. You don't know the depth of the water, you don't know what's underneath the water, you don't know any of that. So, you know, the best thing is to work the banks. Right here you have a little isolated patch of growth that's sticking off the bank about 4 feet. I would cast right to that isolated growth. I mean, it's small, but that little bit of growth is going to hold fish. Right here you have a random growth of a tree, and you can see it's kind of sticking out of the water. I would try to skip or try to get a lure, you know, any kind of lure that's kind of weedless underneath that little hump of that tree, and just get as close as you can to that, because this is like an isolated little pocket, and you can see it leads to a creek. You know, back in that creek, you're going to have some of that inflow of water or outflow, and fish are going to hold right along here as well. So I would fish this vegetation right here, and I would fish along that tree, and this is like an isolated like little bank that, you know, on a windy day will give you protection when you're fishing, and also it's going to hold fish. You have this big structure of a, you know, an overgrowth of a tree here as well, and I would try to skip underneath this tree. Just skip it underneath this, and you can see there's a down little piece of wood there. Fish are going to hold, they're going to be holding back in there. Once again, you got a down tree here that's sticking out in the water. I would fish all along this. You have a pocket back in there. I would get a, you know, skip something back in there as well, or get a lure back in there. And that little, you know, open area there is going to hold fish, because they're waiting to see something come around the corner here. They're going to come out and ambush, you know, it's like an ambush spot for the fish. Then you got all this down timber here that you can fish along as well. You're gonna get little, you know, pockets in between all this. Try to get a lure back in there. You're gonna get fish in that area. You know, you got a lot of overgrowth here as well, and this is just prime real estate for fish to be holding in back throughout here and just looking to ambush. This is another area that's great too, right through here. I mean, this whole bank along this whole lake, there's a lot of place for fish to hold. So you want to try to cover as much water as you can, and you want to just pinpoint these certain things. You know, you got a piece of timber sticking out of the water there. You got a couple, and you got a little one sticking there, and you got a couple little tiny branches right there. This whole little area right here is, you can see there's actually a bobber stuck back in there. People fish it. You know, this is another good area to find fish when you have no electronics. Another area I would look to fish if I had no electronics is where this lake kind of goes back in. There's like a little bit of a, you know, indentation, a little bit of a cove right here. I would fish right here at the beginning, work along the point right here, and just fish all back through there and work my way around here. You can see straight ahead there is a little branch that's sticking out that must have been broken off from somewhere. That little individual branch or tube or whatever that's in front of us, it looks like it's an old tree branch. Just that isolated piece of structure is going to hold fish. And when the wind's blowing and pushing against this bank, it's going to push bait fish back through here. So the fish are going to, you know, hang out back through here, and they're going to wait for that bait fish just to kind of really come at them. Here you got another down, you know, another down branch, another lay down area basically. And I would fish, you know, underneath this as best I can without getting hung up, and fish in between all this little down timber that's laying right here. So right here we have another peninsula sticking out into the water. Now you guys see, you got your point right here. So I would cast the lure straight out here and work it, you know, work it towards me, because if this is sticking out here, it's definitely going to, you know, start out deeper and come up where it's going to come up shallower, and fish are going to hold right on either side of that area. And I'm going to take you over the top of this end of this point here and show you on the graph that right now we're in 6.6 feet of water. And you're going to see as I go over the top of this, it's going to get shallow, and you're going to see that it comes up. So we're at 5.7, 5.5, and right now the water's up a little bit, but you can see how quickly it's coming up. We're at 4.5, 4 feet, 3.9, and you can see the peak right here. So right there is where fish are going to hold. So it's almost like a little mini mountain underneath the water that you can see. It drops right back off to like 6.5, 7 feet, 8 feet. I can't tell you how many fish I've caught at the end of this peninsula where the fish are holding right at the top there in the flat area. There's also a brush there that you couldn't see, but fish always, you know, where that's the brush sticking out from this peninsula that's underneath the water. Fish love hanging at that peninsula, and I catch a lot of fish there. The base of a tree that fell down, a really big one. I cast my lure against that base of that tree and just let it fall and let it drop right straight down there, and fish always hide out there too as well. I'm doing all this basically without my electronics. I'm just going off of where, if I was a fish, where would I hang? And a lot of the fishing I do on this body of water is without my electronics. It's just based on structure, things that stick out, you know, things that grab my attention. Once again, we got a little bit of an indentation here. I would cast my lure right back in here and work along the edge each way and cast it right back in. One thing I do want you to see, right off this bank here, you can see off this side with the side scan, there's a bunch of there's a bunch of growth that's underneath there, and you got these little branches sticking out, and it's going to hold fish down in there too. So even if you're fishing without electronics, fish off the bank a little bit, you know, go out about 20 feet and just find something that's deep diving, you know, that you can feel the bottom, like a deep diving crankbait that you'll feel the bottom, and you can kind of base the depth of the water on your crankbait too. That's another good, you know, another good option to use is a crankbait to find fish. You know, if you use a crankbait that dives 5 feet and you know you're hitting bottom, at least you know that you're in a 5 foot, you know, you're in a 5 foot depth of the water column where you're fishing. You know, so crankbait's a good bait to use to be able to find how deep you are as well too. Now, if you know you're really banging hard against that bottom and you have a 5 foot running crankbait, you know that depth of that water is probably about 3 feet, and you're just digging into that bottom. So right in front of us, we have a PVC pipe sticking out, and it used to look like this place used to have some like active, you can see there's like a little shed over there. Who knows what they did here, but you got a piece of PVC pipe sticking out of the water here. There's one that you probably can't see that's underneath the water sticking up. You got that pole sticking there with whatever they did on that, and they got like a metal thing here they had a fence on. Just that piece of pipe there That little piece of pipe underneath the water, I don't know if you can see the white there underneath the water, and that stake is just isolated structure, especially right now when there's not much growth in the winter. That's this isolated structure that's going to hold fish. So we got a big tree that's grown over the water here, whether it's winter time or summertime. When the sun's out, this makes a huge shade area. I would fish underneath this tree here because the fish are going to be hiding underneath there. Then it kind of recesses back in, and the fish are going to be hiding in this area. I mean, bait fish are going to be coming across here, and these bass are going to come out and attack their prey. Here in front of us, we had some brush growing up. Whether you have a fish finder or not, with that brush growing up, it means you know that's like a peninsula sticking out there, where it comes, you know, starts out deep, goes up shallow, probably goes back to deep again. I'd probably use a crankbait or any kind of spinner bait and work myself over this peninsula, because you're going to bang against structure, you're going to grab the attention of those bass and just make some commotion, and they're going to come to that lure and you're going to grab them. I just know that this is an island even without a fish finder, but it does come up. It goes about 8 feet, goes up to about 2 feet, and it goes back off to about 8-9 feet on the other side. So this is holding fish. It's just a natural large structure that's going to hold fish. In front of us we have an island. This island is in the middle of the lake. This is a huge piece of structure just isolated by itself, and then it just drops off drastically, and it's just a large bank that comes down, and those fish are going to be holding along that bank as it comes up. And I would just work along this island and work around it with a crankbait, with you know, jig or a Texas rig setup, and just work yourself down that bank along that edge, and fish are going to be suspended along the, you know, the side of this island here. Take your time and work yourself around this whole island. Different baits, you know, working parallel to the bank, working down the bank. Another thing too, if you got a tree with a bunch of birds on it, don't go underneath it because you'll get pooped on. As it just keeps flowing as I'm going around here. So coming up in front of us, we almost have like a channel created in the lake here. So what I would do in this channel down the middle is I would probably take a drop shot and work myself down through this channel and work along each side of the edges as always. But I would also work the middle of this channel, because you'll have fish just kind of hanging out in this deeper part of the channel, whether it's a few feet or whether it's 10 feet. I would drop shot down the middle of this channel and I would work both edges. You can see right in front of us up ahead, there's actually a kayaker standing and he's working the banks. I don't think he has any electronics on his boat anyway, but he's just visually fishing this body of water. As you see, there's a little indentation here where the water's kind of gone back in, almost made like a little, its own little creek back through there. So I would fish this mouth as far as I can get back without getting hung up, and I would work in between these two trees right in front of me. Something that works kind of along the bottom, because it's probably going to come up and come back down. So I had to work between these two trees. So right here you have some broken tree branches, or actually broken trees. I actually threw a drop shot in between these little branches before, and a Cinco, and I actually caught 2 fish. They were holding right off the point right here, and I just fished in between all these little broken trees, and fish were holding right on this area right here. Now I did that without electronics. That's just visual structure that I'm fishing. And then as you come around this corner, it kind of leads back into, you can see a fish jump right there. It kind of leads into another little creek. So right again, once again, you got the mouth of the creek right here. I would fish this, and I would fish as far as I can back through this little creek here, and fish along the bank, and also fish the middle of this. You know, any flowing water also attracts fish. They like to be in that current. They like to have that, you know, that movement, because the bait fish are going to come basically right to them. Right in front of us, we have an individual tree just sticking up in the middle of the water. That is going to be a piece of structure that's going to hold fish. Last but not least, you have another little channel here that leads to a bridge in front of us. I would work this point here. I would work this point here, and work myself along each side of these banks back down to that bridge. And especially on the hot summer days, or even in the winter time when that sun is out, fish underneath any kind of structure that's going to create shade, because when the temperature out here is 80, it's probably going to be about 75 or less underneath that bridge when it's hot out, you know, the water temperature itself. So skip a jig, skip a, you know, a spinner bait, anything you can get underneath that bridge without, you know, getting hung up, you know, a Texas rig, Cinco, whatever you can get underneath that bridge, get underneath that bridge and work it back to you. There's going to be fish hiding underneath that bridge because it's going to create a shade line. Even today, when it's not sunny, there is still a dark line that runs in right, you know, the shadow of that bridge. Fish are going to hold in that shadow line. They're going to hold underneath this bridge. It's just another structure that's going to create, like I said, that shadow line, and it's just another structure that's going to hold fish. You know, shadow lines, any of that stuff is a big factor in holding fish. So I hope this video helped some of you, you know, whether you've been fishing for a long time or just starting out. There's a lot of things that you can visually see yourself that's going to hold fish. You do not have to have electronics. Whether people tell you that or not, that you have to have all this fancy gadgets, you don't. You can go out with any kayak, any rod and reel, and some lures and catch fish just based on what you visually see yourself. You don't have to have the fancy graphs to do this. If you guys did like this video, please hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and comment. It helps all that crazy algorithm that, you know, involves YouTube's and helps these videos get out there so other anglers can see this video as well. So as always, be safe on the water. I'll catch you guys on the water, and I appreciate all of you watching. Thanks.